ago, when I was still an active part of the parish ministry in the Southeastern Synod, the words mountaintop experience were a go-to phrase. It was though every professional church worker's workshop, retreat, or conference involved in some form or another a sharing of a mountaintop experience. It got to the point that we referred to it just as an MTE for mountaintop experience. We were asked so often about our MTEs that we knew exactly what our fellow participants were going to share. I remember that once as we started out for the event of the day, Pastor Steve Cooper asked me, "Suzanne, have you come up with a new MTE to share today?" I made up one. Want to hear it? Yeah, it was that bad. And so between Roswell and Birmingham, Pastor Steve and I made up a new MTE for me to share. MTE, Mountaintop Experiences. This Sunday's readings have more than one reference to an MTE. Our first reading recalls Moses' experience with God on Mount Sinai, where Moses waits for 6 days before God calls to him from the cloud. And then he spends 40 days and nights in the cloud. Though not Moses' first mountaintop experience with God, we also recall his commissioning on Mount Horeb. Today's account speaks with eloquence of the covering of Mount Sinai for 6 days and nights, with a cloud as brilliant as a devouring fire, as God places into Moses' keeping the laws of the Lord. Read further in Exodus, and we learn that when he descended from his mountaintop experience, Moses was radiant with light because he had spoken to the Lord. Our gospel reading today provides the big MTE. It is the luminous story of a mystical encounter, not only between God and his beloved Son, but also between those at the center of the story, Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Yes, that Moses, the Moses who died approximately 1,400 years before today's event took place. And Elijah, who had been taken up to heaven in a chariot 850 years earlier. Yes, here they were, standing next to Jesus. And then there were those who watched, Peter, James, and John. And oh yes, there are all of us watching this story play out, trying to figure out just what this story means. In real time, this event occurs just before Jesus enters Jerusalem, where he will be crucified. Jesus invited only 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and his brother John, to go up with him up the winding mountain trail, looking for a secluded, quiet place, perhaps to pray. The 3 men did not really know Jesus' intent for this side trip, but they went and questioned with Jesus, perhaps satisfied that they might get to spend some quality time with him. The men are quiet, aware of the breathlessness this climb has created in their bodies. At last, when they come to a level spot, they rest. Perhaps pray, perhaps contemplate the meaning of this time with Jesus. Through their closed eyelids, they are aware of a sudden, brilliant light. And when they open them, they are struck by a dazzling light, the kind of which they have never witnessed before. The light is emanating from Jesus. But is it Jesus? The light pulses, it illuminates the area around Jesus. His face shines like a fire. His clothes are an indescribable dazzling white. This isn't the sun, or some other outside source of light reflecting off of Jesus. This is Jesus shining light from within himself. visible proof that Jesus is indeed the light of the world. But that's not all. 2 other people have joined Jesus in that bright light. Who? It can't be. They are dead. Moses, Elijah. Matthew does not address the intent of having Moses and Elijah with Jesus on the mountain. We have to look to the book of Luke for the answer. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. His departure at Jerusalem. Notice, Moses and Elijah are not talking about Jesus' glorious appearance. They are talking about Jesus' upcoming journey to Jerusalem and the way that Jesus would fulfill the law as represented by Moses and the prophets, represented by Elijah. All is silent. Then the voice of the one who always finds it hard to be silent speaks up. "Tents, Lord! I think we need tents." But Peter is cut short as a cloud covers everything on that mountaintop. A voice breaks the silence with an astounding request. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Notice it does not say, "Listen to me." Rather, it says, "Listen to him." Literally knocked off their feet, the men must be overcome with fear by what has just happened. Then Jesus brings them back to reality, touching them and commanding them to get up. But don't be afraid by what you have just seen. I am certain that already the thoughts are racing through their minds. Who will believe us? How will we describe what has just happened? Who should we tell? But no one will believe us. Jesus solves it all. Tell no one. Well, there you have it, an unbelievable mountaintop experience. Except we know that it is believable because we witnessed it right there in Matthew. It sets into action what is to come for you and me in the coming weeks as we veer in a new direction in the church year. We are still fresh with memories of the waiting in Advent, the celebration of Jesus' birth at Christmas, and the many small revelations of God's majesty throughout Epiphany. We have been working our way toward this, the day on the mountaintop when Jesus was seen in his humanness, but also in his brilliant, illuminating godliness. Beginning Wednesday, we make the move into Lent, a season not typically marked by images of light. The scene on the mountain assures us that as we begin our Lenten pilgrimage, we are indeed following the Son of God. This is no impostor. This is no pretender. It is the Son of God. And we know this to be true because God declared him to be his beloved Son. I have to confess, I frequently have trouble seeing the difficulty between some of our readings on a Sunday. But this Sunday, there certainly was no doubt in my mind that this mountaintop experience is relevant to our lives. We saw the mountain glowing with brightness when Moses received the tablets of stone in the first reading in Exodus. And of course, it was there in our gospel reading, the indescribable brilliance that radiated from Jesus. But wait a minute. Our reading from 2 Peter revisits the transfiguration scene. And who is the assumed author of this book? Simon Peter. Peter, who was a witness to the great mountaintop experience. He describes it first in first-hand language, what he saw and what he heard. And this is what he says. When we told you about the power and the return of our Lord Jesus Christ, we were not telling clever stories that someone had made up. Perhaps there were those who disbelieved what the 3 disciples saw, and they were directed to tell no one. Peter writes, but with our own eyes we saw his true greatness, and we heard our great and wonderful Father honor him by saying, this is my dear Son, and I am pleased with him. And if you still have any doubt that Peter was a witness, he loudly lets us know, we were there with Jesus on the holy mountain and heard this voice speak from heaven. From a spiritual standpoint, there are a lot of people seeking a mountaintop experience in their spiritual lives, a time or a place where they feel they experience God as they have never before, and that God is more present than anywhere else. But I want to emphasize with you, we all have not had these experiences. And if I revealed to you that long ago example I shared with my fellow conference attendees, you would probably laugh and agree with me. That was a pretty far-fetched example of an MTE. The truth is, if or even when we experience an MTE, it is certainly not something we planned. And we cannot stay in that place, that mountain, that euphoria forever, as much as we would like to. Often when God is encountered, whether it is in an MTE or in some other personal experience, God in some way offers us an invitation, and then we can respond. We leave that mountain. We walk with Jesus down into the valley, not immune to the dust from everyday life that falls on our shoulders. The events of the next weeks, the traditional activities of Lent leading up to Easter, help us to maintain the eyes, ears, and heart to see and hear God whenever and however God appears to us. I recall a parishioner once saying that he heard a TV evangelist remark that all we needed to find our mountaintop experiences is to find God. But is that the point of the Transfiguration experience? Did God the Father say, this is my beloved Son, climb this mountain and do these things and you'll see the vision too? No. God the Father simply said, this is my beloved Son, listen to him. It is no coincidence that once the disciples heard the voice of God, that everything was gone. Moses and Elijah were no longer standing there. Jesus appeared just as he had before the Transfiguration. No bells, no whistles, no angels, no bright lights, no eye-blinking theatrics. They were all gone. But Jesus was still right there before them. And what remained loud and clear in the ears of the disciples were the simple command, listen to him. Today is Edward R. Murrow, now that's an oldie, used to say, you were there. You were on the mountaintop. It is a story you can take with you wherever you go. It reassures you that no matter what mountain trail in life, you must go up. You do not go alone. It tells you that yes, things can get pretty scary before you realize the presence of God in that journey. Above all, it tells you that there is someone standing on that mountaintop with you. Oh yes, mountaintop experiences are not always at first soul-satisfying, spirit-calming events. They can shake us to our very core. But then you see who that brilliance is standing with you in the center of the cloud. It is the only one who truly invites you and listens to you and who is worth listening to, because it is God's beloved Son telling you that you are his, and he will go with you down the mountain, hand in hand. Listen to him. Wednesday evening, we move into the season of Lent as we gather for Ash Wednesday worship. On that day and throughout the Lenten season, we will hear the words of Jesus' familiar journey to Jerusalem. Listen to Jesus. When Pastor Jim draws the little black cross upon your forehead and says, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return, listen to Jesus. Listen to Jesus speak from the cross. Listen to Jesus as he suffers and dies and then rises again for you. Listen to Jesus. Listen not just today, not just during Lent, but always. when we stop and listen to God's words and listen to His Son, we experience more than a mountaintop experience. Amen.
Amen.
Our hymn of the day is How Good, Lord, to Be Here, hymn 315.